When you dreamed about your future marriage, did you picture the fights? When you got excited about your new career, did you think about all the office politics? When you planned to move to that new city, did you sit down and consider everything that you would be leaving behind? Probably not. And that gap between what you imagined and what actually happened is, I would argue, the source of most of the suffering in your life. David Foster Wallace once said that the truth will set you free, but only after it's had its way with you first. So for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to have my way with you and deliver some harsh truths. So I've spent the last decade of my career writing about the psychology of our worst decisions. And these 6 truths are the ones that I keep coming back to. My name is Mark Manson. I'm the best-selling author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and this is my Genius Talk. Truth number 1, everything in life is a trade-off. Now, a lot of trade-offs in life are pretty mundane. You walk into an overpriced coffee shop, you hand over your $6, and they give you a mediocre latte. There's a clear trade-off there. You give the money, they give you the latte, you move on with your life. But then there are trade-offs that aren't so clear. They're a little bit abstract, intangible, maybe a little bit long-term. For example, let's say you read a book about animal welfare and you get really excited and you decide to become a vegan. Now, in that moment, you're probably only thinking about the ethical benefits of this new lifestyle. You're not considering the fact that nobody is ever going to invite you to dinner again. Or there was a friend of mine about 10 years ago who got really into triathlons. He started waking up at 4 in the morning to ride his bike for 2 or 3 hours. He got so into it and so competitive that he was skipping out on taking his kids to school. He wasn't coming home for dinner at night. He was training so hard that he was falling asleep at 7:30. Eventually, it reached a point where his wife left him. We struggle so much not only with managing these trade-offs, but recognizing that we're making them in the first place. Our minds are not naturally built to handle them. And that's the problem, because those long-term trade-offs are the most important decisions that you and I will ever make. Now, the reason I built my entire career around this idea, the reason I keep writing about it incessantly in different ways, is that we are shockingly bad at seeing the trade-offs that matter. Nobody dreams about their future marriage and pictures the fights. Nobody gets excited about their new career and thinks about the bullshit office politics. We chase the benefits and pretend that the costs don't exist. Everything in life is a trade-off. The question is whether you're willing to see both sides of that trade-off or not. And this brings us to truth number 2. Our default is to deny that there is no trade-off. Understanding that trade-offs exist is only half of the problem, because there's a real psychological reason that we keep ignoring them. When you're weighing whether to run a triathlon, there's no spreadsheet for that. There's no clean cost-benefit analysis of what your family's gonna think or how much time you're gonna get with your kids, because the decision is so personal, it's so values-driven, it becomes emotionally overwhelming to consider all of the repercussions. And when we're emotionally overwhelmed, we fall back into our primate brain. We turn back into our animalistic selves, the monkeys. And this animalistic side of ourselves does not weigh pros and cons cleanly. It's not able to see both the good and bad of something at the same time. We default back into black and white thinking. There's no in between. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. When people hold contradictory feelings about something, when you feel that something is both good and bad simultaneously, it creates a stress and anxiety inside of us. And like all stress and anxiety, our natural inclination is to avoid it, to get away from it. And usually that avoidance comes in the form of what scientists refer to as bullshit, i.e. believing some distorted perception of reality. Put simply, everything is a trade-off, therefore everything has both a positive and negative element to it. But our primate brain is terrible at feeling both positive and negative simultaneously, therefore it looks for beliefs that will justify feeling either all positive or all negative. And this detachment from the trade-offs of our decisions detaches us from reality. Think about it. The most delusional people you ever meet, what makes them seem so out of their fucking minds? It's probably that they hold some extreme positive or extreme negative view about the world that simply doesn't exist. It's not accurate. Now, we all do this. We all have a tendency to return to this default state. And fighting it takes effort. It takes cognitive energy. It takes willpower to override the animal brain with the rational one. You have to slow down. You have to sit with the discomfort, and you have to actually think through it. The more distracted you are, the more you're flooded with news and social media and noise, the less horsepower you have left to fight against your own cognitive distortions. Black and white thinking drives bad decisions. It's the root of prejudice. It's the start of wars. It keeps wars going. It makes stupid people famous. It's why truth number 2 is so important. Your mind's default setting is to deny that the trade-off exists. Truth number 3, we blame others for the downsides and take credit for the upside. Once you're trapped in that distorted reality, something even worse can start to kick in. The way you escape the discomfort of cognitive dissonance is simple. You outsource the cost to somebody else. Instead of saying, I wasn't present enough in my marriage or as a father because I was running triathlons every day, you say, man, my wife was really needy and wasn't supportive of my ambitions. In psychology, this is often called the actor-observer bias. When I run a red light, it's because I'm in a hurry and I have a really important meeting to get to. But when you run a red light, it's because you're an irresponsible psychopath who should never drive again. The comedian George Carlin nailed this once. He said, have you ever noticed that everyone driving slower than you is an idiot and everyone driving faster than you is a maniac? Somehow you're always driving the perfect speed. Just you. Only you, nobody else. Isn't it incredible how that happens? But we all have this pattern, and if left unchecked, the pattern will lead directly towards entitlement. Because if you truly believe that other people are responsible for your problems and you deserve all the good things without the downside, then you start to see yourself as uniquely special or uniquely victimized. Either way, you're deluding yourself about reality. Now, most people have entitlement backwards. They think it's something you pick up along the way. But entitlement is our default state. It's the monkey brain. It's what has to be trained out of you, not into you. Anyone who's been around small children knows this. No kid has ever said, hey mom, I want ice cream, but I'm weighing the long-term consequences and wondering if we could reach a compromise about eating my veggies tonight. No, your kid looks at you and says, I want ice cream now, and if you don't give it to them, they scream and cry and say they hate you. There's this pervading sense that entitlement is spreading in the world today, that it's growing. And it's most people's assumption to believe that we are somehow training people to be more entitled. But I would argue that's not the case, because entitlement is the default state. And it's the job of parents and teachers and leaders around the world to train entitlement out of the population. And if entitlement is growing, it's because we're failing to do that. Because that's really what parenting is. It's showing kids, no, it's not everybody else's fault. Yes, you have to be responsible for your problems and decisions, even if they weren't your fault. No, you don't deserve special treatment. Yes, life is complicated and messy, and there are downsides to everything. David Foster Wallace had another quote that I think about a lot. He said, evil people never believe that they're evil. Instead, they believe everyone else is evil. And I think that's the end game of this whole cycle. Once you've convinced yourself that every problem in your life is somehow somebody else's fault, it's only logical that you start to see everyone else as an enemy. You can flip that around too, by the way. Good people rarely believe that they're good. Instead, they tend to see the good in everyone else. So when you meet somebody new, pay attention to how they talk about other people. If everyone else in their life is a villain, that tells you everything you need to know. That is truth number 3. In life, we tend to blame others for the downsides and take credit for the upside. Truth number 4, the enemy of growth is not oppression, but delusion. So if all of this is happening underneath the surface, how do we actually fix it? How do we grow out of this entitlement? Most people assume that if they want to grow, they need some new perspective, some new hack, some life-changing habit. And the longer I do this work, the more I think personal growth is really just one long struggle against your own bullshit. You don't need more information. You need to figure out which of your beliefs are false, which are the delusions. Because think about it, if you knew exactly what was worth doing, motivation would not be an issue. If you had a perfectly accurate view of yourself and the people around you, you'd probably stop fucking up most of your relationships. The typical self-help model will tell you, read this book, follow this framework, become a new person. There's supposed to be this dramatic before and after moment, but that's unrealistic. And worse, it puts a ton of unhelpful pressure on you. You read the book, you try the thing, you mess up a few times, and now you feel like you failed. Or you try it and you don't love it, and you feel like something must be wrong inside of you. That whole model sets people up to simply quit. But when you approach things as an experiment, as though you're just gathering information, like, I'm gonna give up alcohol for 30 days and just see how it affects my life. You have no expectations, there's no expected identity shift. You open yourself to any possible outcome, and whether it works or doesn't work, you still gain information and you grow and become better. And that's when the trade-offs actually reveal themselves. When you discover that the benefits you thought you were getting from drinking weren't that significant, or you discover that the cost of quitting is bigger than you expected. Either way, when you remove the expectation of an outcome, you learn something either way about yourself. So here are some quick experiments you could start today. Stop talking to a friend who treats you like garbage. Give up social media for a week, see what happens. Have a difficult conversation that you've been avoiding. See how it turns out. Frame it all as a test, and then you remove the shame and pressure and judgment from expecting it to go a certain way. Because here's a little bonus truth. Nobody can tell you what's gonna work for you. Not me, not your therapist, not a book, not the best coach in the world. The only way to figure things out is to try stuff, collect data, and then adjust accordingly. The people who actually change their lives are not the ones who found the perfect system. They're the ones who ran enough experiments to figure out what they personally needed. Because truth number 4 is the enemy of growth is not oppression, it's delusion. Truth number 5, all trade-offs involve pain, but bad trade-offs create suffering. There's an old allegory from the Buddha that I find really powerful. He said getting hurt is like being struck by 2 arrows. The first arrow is the actual event, the physical pain, the loss, the rejection. And the first arrow, even when it's excruciating, is always temporary. It eventually fades. But the second arrow is the story you tell yourself about the first arrow. Why did I get struck by an arrow? Why me? Why does it hurt so bad for me? Why didn't Jim get struck by an arrow? Jim's an asshole. He deserves to get struck by an arrow. I'm a good person. Or maybe you tell yourself, I deserved to be hurt. Maybe there's something wrong with me, and maybe this is what I get for that. Whatever the story is, there's an endless narration that we spin inside of our heads about our pain. And the problem with the second arrow story is that the story doesn't fade. And in a lot of cases, it sticks around for so long that we forget it's a story in the first place. We come to believe that it's simply the truth. And because we forget that it's a story, it stays with us forever. This is why I always come back to the idea of choosing your pain instead of choosing your pleasure. This can short circuit the default state. It helps us align our decisions with reality. Because when you choose the downsides you want in a decision, you are de facto owning the trade-off. So ask yourself, what is the first arrow I actually kind of enjoy? Because we all have something. We're all secretly a little bit of a masochist deep down. Some pain, some struggle that secretly makes us feel alive. And if you start there, then you become immune to the second arrow. Then the second arrow actually benefits you because you feel like you're doing something meaningful. You're giving something up for a greater cause. So ask yourself, what's the first arrow I actually kind of enjoy? Because we all secretly enjoy something. We're all a little bit of a masochist deep down. There's some pain, some struggle that secretly makes us feel alive. And if you start there, you become immune to the suffering of the second arrow. You know what you're signing up for before you sign up for it. And what's more is that because you enjoy the pain and struggle, it starts to feel meaningful. It starts to feel like you're making a meaningful sacrifice for something greater than yourself. And because of that, you're more likely to sustain through the difficult times, and you're more likely to accomplish great things. I'll give you a personal example of this. So before I ever thought about writing or YouTube or anything, before any of the books or any of this, I went to music school. I wanted to be a musician. That was my childhood dream. And so I went to music school, and quickly I was miserable. I was practicing 4 to 6 hours a day. I went to every lesson, every class. I did all the theory, all the exercises. And I remember one day going into one of my private lessons, and my guitar teacher put his hand on my guitar, stopping me from playing. And he said, "Look, you just don't practice enough. And I remember thinking, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? Like, all I do is practice. And so I was really depressed and really bummed out about it. So I remember there was one kid in my program, his name was Chris McQueen. He was like the one guy in my class that like everybody knew he was gonna make it. It was the rest of us we weren't sure about. So one day I corner Chris in the cafeteria and I just start grilling him. I'm like, what's your practice routine? How do you warm up each day? What's your method for learning a new tune? How are you doing your scales? And he just kept kind of shrugging at me and being like, I don't know, man. I just kind of play until I get it right. And I was like, dude, fuck this guy. There's a secret he's not telling me. Clearly he knows something I don't. Now, it took me years to figure out actually what Chris knew that I didn't. Chris didn't have to think hard about practicing because he loved practicing. I had to think hard about practicing because I hated it. And that's the thing. The real cost of being a musician is practicing. If you're a professional musician, 99% of your time is spent practicing. Not on stage, not in a studio, not rehearsing. You're sitting by yourself in a quiet room, playing scales and chords and harmonies until you can't get it wrong. But you don't think about that when you're young and watching a concert and imagining yourself on stage. But that's the real trade-off of being a musician. Now, because Chris loved the downside of being a musician, he has gone on and won 2 Grammys. I dropped out the next semester and never looked back. I think this is low-key the secret to most career advice. If you can find the struggle that you seem to tolerate much better than others, if you find the shit sandwich you're willing to eat that nobody else will, that becomes your competitive advantage. So the question is never, how do I avoid the pain? That's impossible. The question is, what is the pain that I'm willing to sustain? Because you're going to feel the pain either way. The only choice you get is what flavor of shit sandwich. That's truth number 5. All trade-offs cause pain, but only bad trade-offs cause suffering. This brings me to my final truth. There is no such thing as a balanced life. Once you accept the rule of trade-offs, this is perhaps the most painful truth to admit of all, that you cannot have everything. This moment in human history is unique in that we are the first generation of humans that is exposed to exponentially more cool things we'd like to do than we will ever have the time or energy to do. There are more career paths, more hobbies, more places to live, more people to meet, more Netflix shows, more TikToks to watch. Therefore, we develop a natural tendency to assume that we can do it all, that we should do it all. And when we don't, we feel as though we've somehow failed. We want to get a raise at work and be a great parent and spend more time with our friends and learn French on weekends and beat everybody at pickleball and have 6-pack abs and check out that new restaurant opening and buy a new car and take a month-long vacation and watch 6 seasons of a show on Netflix. You gotta pick a couple, motherfucker. The truth is that it takes such an incredible amount of time and effort to do anything well that each of us is forced to let go of many things we'd love to have in our lives, but simply cannot afford the trade-offs. The problem is, this is not the message you and I are told. Hustle culture and gurus and think pieces will always tell you that you can optimize yourself into having it all. But refusing to accept that there's a trade-off is itself a terrible trade-off. The real psychological challenge of this era is developing the ability to say no. And not just say no to good things. Say no to things that we would actually love to have in our lives. To let those things go. Not because they're bad, but because you can't have everything and do everything well. You have to pick 1 or 2 trade-offs that you're willing to make and then go all in on them. You have to decide, what am I willing to suffer for? And then own that. Build your identity around that. And then live with the knowledge that all of the other versions of yourself, you will never become those people.